about test sessions and what they look like in DRC Insight and what you can expect based on what the data that you have in PowerSchool. And then I have just a kind of a quick checklist for troubleshooting when you don't see the students in DRC Insight, because that happened a lot last year. So if you don't see your students in there when you start entering accommodations on Monday, then you can look for a few things to try and figure out why. And finally, we'll just have some questions and answers, but of course you can ask questions throughout. It's not a formal presentation, just stop us and ask a question whenever you want to. So Stacy Royster is going to start us off with the little demo. And so I will stop sharing and let her share. Right, there it is.
All right, can everyone hear me and see my screen?
Yep.
Perfect.
I see it.
All right, so I'm sorry, Kathy, were you going to say something else?
Nope, I was just going to say I see it.
Perfect. All right, so for those of you who don't know me, I am Stacy Royster. I work at the State Department. I am your PowerSchool program coordinator, here to help in any way possible with your use of PowerSchool. And one of the things that we do here at the State Department is roster the students in DRC on your behalf based on the markings that you place inside of PowerSchool. There are a couple of different ways to do this, so I'm actually going to show you different variations of it, and then we'll jump over into the special programs piece to show you where those markers are. So the first thing I'm going to do is look at it from an elementary school perspective, because depending on if you're elementary where you kind of have those self-contained classrooms where it's the same kids in the homeroom class and the English, they're just in that same teacher's room all day, some schools do those differently than, let's say, the middle school students who are in one homeroom class but have different teachers in some type of rotation. So I want to look at both scenarios for you. So let's look at an elementary school first, and I'm going to go into the teacher schedules, and I am going to choose Caitlin Maddox as a teacher. Now, in this scenario right here, we have her teaching a set of second grade classes that the kids are the same in all of these courses. So when it comes to marking ACAP, let me just click into a section number. So I'm going to go into this homeroom class right here. In the section setup, all of the marking for our assessments, this was for ALA kids for your kindergarten, but this is also where your ACAP is at the very bottom of the screen in this assessment cohort information right here. So you see that for ACAP, we have to mark for the three, the reading, the math, and the science. So when you do these markers, this set of students who are enrolled in the section that I checked this box for will become your rostered set of students, and kind of how the tests come packaged together per se in a virtual world. And so districts have different ways that they like to think about how they want to mark these students. In this case, in this elementary school, let me go back to the list of her classes. The students are the exact same. These 12 students are the same in this homeroom class versus this reading versus this math versus this science. So if it's the same set of students, the question that I get most often is, Stacy, do we have to mark it for the individual course, or can we just all mark them in a homeroom? It's completely up to you how you want to do it. In my opinion, if this was Stacy running the school and I had to mark for my ACAP and this was the situation, I would try to do as few clicks as possible, which means I would probably just come into the homeroom and go, these are my sets of kids. I'm going to say this is the roster I want them to use for all three of those for this set of students, and I submit the page. So you can do multiple markings on one roster within PowerSchool if you want to, when it's that kind of self-contained situation. Now, this is very different when you get into the upper levels where the kids start rotating, and you might have kids that rotate in 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade. So let's swap over to a middle school, and let's go to a teacher schedule. And I click, and I'm going to tell you, in this pilot site, I don't think I have anybody actually scheduled in these, but you'll get the idea. Oh, let me get a set of classes. This this is all pilot data. Okay, so let's say that we have this one right here. So this teacher is teaching 7th grade math. When it comes to the middle schools, the districts are going to have, or schools per se, are going to need to make a decision at how they want to see the kids rostered. Do you want them rostered according to a homeroom, or do you want them rostered according to the actual teacher that's teaching that group of students? We see it go multiple ways across the state. So you have to make that decision. Once you do, it's then just a matter of clicking into here. So let's say that in my middle school right here, I want the kids rostered for their content areas according to the teacher who's actually teaching them. So for the 7th grade math, I want the kids who are under Jada Harper to be roster under Jada Harper here. So I would just click into that section of 7th grade math, and I would check to only roster those kids in their mathematics cohort. So where would they get rostered for their reading and science cohort for purposes of testing? Well, I would go find who their reading teacher is and roster them there, and find who their science teacher is and click the box there. So doing it this way will lead to more clicks, but it's more preferred in my conversations I've had with districts. But again, it's completely up to you. If you would rather say, no, I'm just going to roster the test based on everybody's homeroom classes, that way I can mark them all at one time to get all the kids, perfectly doable as well. Just remember that your testing packets that you get, how it's going to keep those kids bundled together, is based on how you check these boxes within those sections. So it's in these sections up under the teacher schedules where you'll need to check that. Now, we know that this is a lot of checking to do. So how do you know that you haven't missed a student? Like maybe a student is, because a lot of times it happens with AAA kids. You've got 1 or 2 of them scheduled in this extra class somewhere that you forgot to go mark and check. Well, there is a way in PowerSchool, and you can see it from the district office or the school level, depending on where your rights are, in our level data state validation suite. So when you're on the main page of either the school or in the district, you come to level data state validation. There's an assessments tab that you can see. And in this assessment tab, it will tell you if you've done an uh-oh. Either you have a kid that's scheduled across multiple sections that you have marked, and you should only have them marked for one, or it'll tell you if you don't have anyone marked at all. So like, for example, you see I have a list right here of 1,100 kids that have not been enrolled in a mathematics assessment cohort in their grades 2 through 8 that must test. So you can click on this list to make them the current selection, but really you're not doing anything on the student record. You're doing it to the teacher's schedule record. So that's where the markings have to be. So the way that you kind of decode is to figure out who they're scheduled for in math. So if I click on this list, I can see that, okay, this student's not been marked. So apparently whatever course or whoever teacher is teaching her classes, I've not marked her teacher anywhere, or not marked her in a section with a teacher that's been identified. So I can click on this modify schedule screen. Now this student has no sections right here, but I would look at whatever classes they had. And if it was the homeroom class, or I was like, oh, I forgot to go mark Miss Royster's classes, I could then go back to teacher schedules, go into Miss Royster's classes, and click on that box for science or math or reading, whichever would be pertinent to that student's information at that moment in time. So once you go through and decide your game plan of how you want to group these kids together, you go find those teacher schedules, mark that checkbox at the bottom of the section edit page, and then when you're finished marking, come to this tab right here to see that you have no errors. You've got 2 pages right here to look at. So it'll tell you if you have missed marking someone at, in a cohort for assessment for ACAP, if they're an alternate student as well, because sometimes, like we said, those AAA students are in those AAA classes that we forget to go in and check box along with the core and gen ed classes that we go mark on kids. So before I go into special programs, does anyone have any questions on this part of marking the ACAP as far as your rostering is concerned here? Kathy, was there anything in particular that you wanted me to show besides that piece of it right here in the SIS side?
No, that was exactly what I wanted you to show, and
Perfect.
I think it was pretty thorough. But you did go through it quickly. So if anybody has questions, don't hesitate to stop us and ask.
Yes, feel free to unmute, ask, and like I said, as y'all are going through doing this, if you have questions or want some help in kind of your thought process through it, feel free to reach out to me anytime, and I will be glad to help you with this. I was the tech director in Opelika before I came to the State Department, so I was the one who did this for our district just to help out. So very familiar with this process and how to roster them.
Kathy, I have a question. Am I correct in thinking that this also determines the rostering for reports as well? Is that still that way this year?
Yes, it is, and that's an important point. So that everything starts here in PowerSchool, and then it carries throughout in DRC Insight. So the test sessions are set up according to this. The test tickets are printed and shipped and packaged according to this, and then the data are reported according to what's selected in here. So, yes.
And that's why you have a lot of like the non-elementary classes where you actually start going to those rotations. When everybody found out that the reports are based on this, they're like, no, I want the reports for Miss Royster's math class to be all grouped with Miss Royster's kids, because they want to kind of do some comparisons and all stuff like that. So that is something to very much keep in consideration, that it's more than just rostering for test tickets, but it's how your data will come back to you as well.
Stacy, I had a question, please.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we, for my middle school, we wanted to do by first period. And even though I'm, Mr. Gray teaches first period math, I'm still going to test those same kids. My first period for math, I'm going to also test them for reading, and I'm also going to test them for science. Can we do it that way?
You absolutely can. So if that were the case, it would kind of be like what I did in that elementary school with the homeroom class. I would just click on that. If my first period, so pretend that this was a reading teacher, English teacher or something. If this was my first period, whichever one of these sections in that teacher schedule is the one I want, I would just click in that section number and go, okay, this is that first period class. You're going to be my roster and report for everything, and then submit it in.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh. All right, if there are no other questions on the SIS side, which again, we can always pop back this if we need to, let's flip over into the special programs piece. So if you are the special programs person responsible for that. And just FYI, every bit of this data that you see in my pilot is these are not real kids, so I'm not sharing any FERPA data, which is a great thing because I have to do lots of demonstrations with this data. So how do we mark for EL status, and where is that alternate assessment checkbox located on our special education students? So let's start first with our EL students. So if we have a student that has already received a special programs profile somewhere in here, which means, and in special programs, we have 5 modules. We have special education, we have gifted, we have RTI, 504, and we have EL. So if they've been identified for any one of those 5, then when you go to search them, they are up here in this students, because these are special programs identified students. If it's a general ed student who's just qualified for one of those 5 services for the first time, then they're going to be found under gen ed students, and typically your coordinators of these sections know how to pull those in. So once they've been pulled in, so I'm going to take Mickey Mouse right here, and I'm going to click on his profile. So let's start with EL. If I were the EL teacher, the EL coordinator, the EL whoever who had to make sure that a student's EL status is in correctly in special programs, then when I access the profile, the first profile that anybody sees is always the student demographic profile that pulls over from the SIS. Now, depending on the security rights, when you hover over this box, tells you which parts of these modules you actually get access to. So if you're the EL person, you probably don't see special education and RTI and 504 and gifted. I happen to be the everybody coordinator, so I see everything. So if I wanted to look at the EL portion here, notice I have this English Learners EL link here. I would click on this, and I'm now looking at the EL student profile. For those who have this access, they typically have an edit access to this profile, which gives them this edit button here, that when they click on that button, this is where the status gets to be entered and confirmed at. So do I need to know that this student is an active EL student? Yes. So how do I determine that he's an active EL student? Well, he's got a current entry date with no exit date, and he has an EL status. And notice here is where our EL status designation resides. So this is where each year your EL teachers or coordinators, whoever has the responsibility, comes in and moves that determination depending on, you know, if they're just testing and qualifying, or if they're in a first or second year of monitoring, or it's the time that they've completed their monitoring. This is where that change would be made. They would have their current test date. And once this is saved, then that is what checks this box that they are an EL student. That then triggers two things. That triggers this EL icon here in special programs, but also if I come back over here into the SIS, and let's go to, oh, I'm at the wrong school. Let's go to the high school where this student is located. And get Mickey's profile up here. You'll notice that no matter what page I'm on, I've got an EL profile icon here as well. And when you're on the state Alabama page inside of the SIS, on this federal programs tab, you will see now it's kind of very light because you can't edit any information here. I don't know if you can see that there is a checkbox right there, and it is checked. So this is feeding over. So notice it says second year in U.S. school, and that's checked. So over here it says second year in U.S. school, and that is checked. So if you want to make sure your students are marked correctly, this is what your testing information from DRC is pulling from, is this page here. This page syncs from this page here. So if you get a student who's not being identified as EL, one of two things are happening. Either the data is marked here and it didn't make it here, which means there's an integration error between the two, which will require a PowerSchool support ticket, or it means it was just never entered here to begin with. So here's where you have to make sure your EL, whoever's got that responsibility, is updating that data and where you see. And if it is and it's integrating correctly and you have access to the SIS, you'll be able to see it here. So any questions on the EL piece of this communication when it comes to special programs? All right, if there's no questions, then let's talk about where that alternate assessment checkbox is for your special education students. So remember how I had the profiles up here? Remember I started off in the student demographics profile? So if I were the special education teacher or director, coordinator, whoever, you probably have access to this special programs profile, or excuse me, special education profile right here. When I click on the special education profile, so this is that overall profile. Now, some people have the edit box, but this is actually not something you need to edit from this main page because it's actually built in the IEP. So I want to show you where the checkbox is. See right here, Alabama alternate assessment participation is yes or no. So that box will check if you have checked the corresponding box in the IEP of the student. So this student has been identified as a special education student because I've just marked them as active so I could always use them for demonstration purposes. So what I would need to do if I was a special education teacher is I would need to go into the documents of this student and I would need to find the IEP. So here's the IEP that I have in progress on this student. And in this, I'm going to need to go, actually, I need to really quick swap to my system admin role so I can do this for you. Your teachers will have security to do this. I just have this where I can only do it in Pilot under this login. so let me go back. I'm going to go back to his documents page. All right, here we are in this IEP. I'm going to, I want to edit this section. Oh, actually, wrong section. So when you're in the IEP, up here at the top, you have these different pages, and it's actually on the second student profile page. So you get this original cover page, but you've actually got to change to this continuation of the student profile. And I always just refer to these to the special questions, the extra ones that they ask at the end of it. But it's this one right here. Has the IEP team determined the student meets the participation criteria for the alternate Alabama alternate assessment? If you check yes, and then save this and finalize it, it will check that box on the main student profile that I just showed you. So if your student is to participate in the alternate assessment, this is where you will need to check the yes in this bank of questions for them to be flagged as an alternate achievement student. So any questions on how to mark your alternate assessment students? And then also, just as a note, that is what will also on this special programs tab. You see how right here you get this alternate assessment participant? When that box gets checked after you finalize that IEP with it marked yes, that right there will change to a yes on this page inside of the SIS. So I'm on this AL page here under special programs. So you can actually look here. And I believe, I probably should have tested this before I do, but I'm going to try something on the fly for you. You'll know that this is a field search that is like really extensive. I do believe that I can search on that actual checkbox. There was a way I've done it before. I'll find it, Kathy, and once I do, I'll send it to you, because there's a way that you can actually query just those kids and get that list so that you don't have to go kid by kid to see if they've actually been marked. You can do it in the SIS as well as in special programs.
That would be great. Yeah, that would really be helpful.
Let me make a note of that, and I'll email that to you so you can give out to everyone.
Okay, and I think it'd be good to add here, if that box is checked, you can expect the student to show up in a test session in DRC Insight as an alternate student, not a summative. However, if for some reason, and this happened last year, somehow they get marked as inactive, their special ed status, it has to be active. So the special ed status has to be active. The dates have to be all encompassing of the window. If the status goes inactive, they're going to automatically flip over to the summative, and you're going to see them as a summative tester. So that has to be correct as well. And the student has to have a primary exceptionality identified in special programs. If they don't have a primary exceptionality identified, that code, then they're going to flip over to the summative side, and you'll think that they're a summative tester. So there are actually three things, most important being that box is checked, but also the special ed status and the primary exceptionality code. So those three things are necessary for the student to show up correctly as an alternate student.
Kathy, could we take this time right now to answer some of those questions that are in the chat box?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and I can't see the chat box, so if it's anything for me, y'all just have to let me know. Sorry.
Okay, great. So the first one is there a way that an EL SPED coordinator or the counselor at a school to see the school-wide list instead of looking up every student individually? Is that what you were talking about earlier, Stacy?
Yes, yes. And okay, so let me show you a couple of things. Because also, remember the level data that we went to for the assessments to find out who wasn't marked? One of in the reports, let's see, I know they've been moving these around on me, so I have to like chase them. In the reports list, I do believe that your EL, I have to look through these. Okay, so here, if you want to know all of your kids who are marked as EL, there's your list. So if I need to know who all has been marked as EL students, there they are. If you needed to export them out, if you needed to know what status they're in, you actually can get that one very quickly inside of SIS. So that helps you with your EL. Let me see, because we've been adding some new rules in here. I just don't think that we've put the alternate one in here. Nope. But we can get that added. It's going to be an easier check on those.
That would be great. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Are all district student assessment coordinators supposed to have access to special programs?
That's a district level decision. Some districts handily hand that over to have them to look at, and some do not. Some keep it all under one person at district office. So it's kind of a district decision as to whether that's handed over or not. I will say this, because a lot of people don't realize that this is a thing in special programs. There is a security group for, like, I'm going to call us the others, because that's what we always were at central office. We were the other people that might need to be able to see this information on students, not necessarily do anything with it. And they kind of call it principal, counselor, and staff group. There, you can assign this to people in special programs so that they can view the information, but not necessarily manipulate any of the information. And of course, your district knows who should be able to see this and who shouldn't.
Great. This is a good question. We have a few 8th grade students on an advanced math track taking 9th grade math at the high school. How should we identify these students for the math portion of the 8th grade math ACAP summative?
That is a great question, because you would not want to check that. Let's say it's an algebra class over at the high school that's also got 9th graders in it. You don't want to check that as being your section, because it's got all those 9th graders in there who you don't want rostered for it. So that means we'd have to think out of the box here.
I'm pretty sure, even if you do check that, and if you just go check that, I think this came up last year, because they're 9th graders, they won't show up in DRC Insight anyway, because the only students we send over for the summative are students in grades 2 through 8. So I don't think it would hurt anything. I can double check with our IS people and with DRC, but I don't think it would hurt anything if you did check those courses as, but then the teacher wouldn't even be at that school. So it might be better to just, I don't know. Good question.
Well, what I've seen some districts do, it's kind of the same thing that they do with caseloads. So there's a way in a teacher schedule. So let's see if I can find one that oh, this is not one, but I know. I'm trying to think. Young. Oh, I don't have her in here. Of course I don't. This one maybe. Okay, so, oh, I'm at the high school. No wonder. Let me swap to the middle school, because that's the one I was looking for. When it comes to scheduling, one of the tricks that we use to get rosters of kids, because everybody knows that in PowerTeacher Pro, teachers only have access to the kids that are actually on their roster. And so what some people do is that they will schedule classes for teachers that are outside of the periods of their bell schedule. So, like, as you can see, I have like 6 periods in my day right here. So let's say that this is a 7th grade math teacher or a teacher, just somebody you're wanting to associate these kids with. You could always create another section. So I'm going to go through that setup right here. Oh, I don't have my rostering course. No, I think I can. Yes. So there's a lot of districts have created this, a schedule filler kind of course, and they call it rostering. And they put it in a period that's not in the bell schedule. They'll set it up for the teachers however they want to, put all this information in, and they'll go, okay, I'm going to use this just to mark my 6 math kids that I've got to go over to the high school. Oh, and if I don't mark the it's on there, I'm going to hit submit. It's saved. And so you can create other sections on a teacher's schedule that aren't sections that we check for attendance, that are not sections that we check for certification, because I know everybody's worried about putting somebody in for an out of field thing. that don't give grades, that don't take attendance, that don't do anything. They're really just holders for the kids and ways to group them together. And so you could do that and mark them, and it would keep them on a clean roster and associate them to a teacher at your school that you would want them to. So there's kind of an out of the box suggestion and possibility that if you wanted to go that route is absolutely possible.
That seems like a good idea, as long as the word gets out there that they don't need to be afraid to do that it's not going to mess them up.
We actually started this when the big issue when we started PowerSchool last year, where you needed a lot of case managers to be able to see the grades on their students, but they weren't scheduled in a class, or either they were adding them to co-teachers and they had 30 classes on their list that they had to like pick through to find. And so we figured out that if we just did a period outside the bell schedule and said, okay, take all of those kids that's on your caseload and create a class called rostering or something very generic, schedule them all in that class that you don't actually do anything with other than use it as a vessel. Now the teachers can have access to those kids and see their grades when they need to all at one time, instead of having to go to 1,500 grade books to see how their caseloads are doing. And so this has been like a game changer solution to quite a few things throughout the state.
Wonderful. Any more questions? Do assessment cohorts have to be marked before we can add accommodations in the DRC portal? No, they do not. Your students should show up in the correct assessment, either summative or alternate, on Monday, the 31st, Monday morning. They should show up fine, even if they don't have an assessment cohort marked. If you find that one of the students is missing, or you have some missing students, then I have a slide with a few things to check to see if maybe there's another reason, but it won't be because of the assessment cohort not being checked yet. Okay, I'll go ahead and share my slide if that's okay, Stacy. Okay, so the DRC Insight test sessions, if you miss a student somehow and you don't catch it in the level data, state data, I can't ever remember how to say that, validation, if they have a homeroom course, we had to institute this last year. If they have a homeroom course, they'll just be pulled in by their homeroom and have that teacher as their test session teacher. That's just a fail safe, so that because we know there will be issues, and we don't want a student to not be able to test. And this, I was trying to make something that might be memorable, because I had to remind myself of this a couple times last year. Assessment cohorts, like Stacy explained very well, is by course section. So you can't assign a student. It's not by student. You can't assign a student to an assessment cohort. It's a course section that is the assessment cohort, and every student enrolled in that section becomes part of that cohort. And I think Stacy explained it probably better than that. And she also went through this, that you can flag more than one subject in a single course. And keep in mind that only classes that are active during the testing window can be used. So if you have some kind of block scheduling, or you have a course that only meets in the fall semester, don't mark that course section as an assessment cohort, because it won't be valid for the second semester. So new this year, the students will be pulled into DRC Insight based on these assessment cohorts, and that's how they'll be grouped in test sessions. That's how their test tickets will arrive, etc. But now in January, you're going to have an opportunity to create new test sessions and add and remove students from test sessions. So that's going to be really helpful. And this is before the test tickets get printed, you can move the kids around within DRC Insight. So if you have some onesies, twosies, or you want a special group of students that get accommodations or that have a specific case manager for special ed, you want all them in a single group, you can do that during this particular time. And so the checklist for troubleshooting to students, the student has to be fully enrolled in order to show up in DRC Insight. That means they have to have a valid entry code of E, not be provisionally enrolled. So no E90s, E98s, or E99s. So you want to check that in the data if you see that a student isn't in DRC Insight and you know they should be. The SSID needs to be 10 digits, and it starts with either a 1 or a 2. So the SSID number has to be correct. And then, of course, the student must be enrolled in PowerSchool in the appropriate grade for the assessment. This happened several times last year. A student would share an SSID with another student in a different district. Well, there can only be one SSID number. It's a unique identifier in DRC Insight. So the student is only going to show up in one of the 2 different districts. So that may be another reason why you don't see a student in there, but that's a little harder to track down. So definitely give me a call on that one. So we already went through this alternate. To be included in the alternate, you've got the flag, the special education status is active, and the primary exceptionality code is in there. Stacy did a good job of going through that. And the EL status the same. The only thing I'll add here is that your first year ELs may be exempt from the ELA assessment, but they're going to show up in an ELA session. So if you want to not see those kids in there, and then you can move them out of those sessions in January when we have that window to second window for accommodations and that window when you can edit test sessions. And that was all I had. Do we have some more questions? So
I have a question.
Will you? Oh, okay, go ahead.
When the state validation report runs, you mentioned that, let's, for example, say first block was used to mark the cohorts, the assessment pieces. If the student doesn't take the test until the spring, will the state validation report pick up that error?
Leslie, say that again. I didn't quite understand that.
She mentioned that, you mark your sections,
Mhm.
and that they have to be marked in a class that's actually active. If
Oh, I
first,
get where you're going. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it will not show that. So like if you accidentally mark them for a fall class and the test is in the spring, it will not pick that up as being an error, because all the validations is checking is that you've got them in a cohort somewhere. It's up to you to make sure you understand that it's a cohort that is actually legitimate. Because PowerSchool doesn't know when the testing dates are to know what to cross-reference.
yeah, that's what I was wondering. I was wondering if that could be added to their rule.
Well, we wouldn't have those dates to know what to add to the rule. Like, it has to live in PowerSchool to be able to be a validation.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Okay, I have a couple of questions about providing the PowerPoint and the recording, and I will definitely get those out to you following this. And will moving students in test sessions in DRC Insight affect the way the results are reported in the interactive reporting? So, for example, if students with accommodations are put in a separate test session, will their results be reported separately? Yes, I am going to double check with DRC on that, but that is my understanding, that whatever test sessions they're in when they test, that's how their results are going to show up. So I'm going to make sure I double check with DRC on that, but that is my understanding. Any other questions? If you want me to email you a copy of the PowerPoint and you're not on our list as a district test coordinator, please email me and I'll respond with sending that back to you, and I'll put my email in here again.
Kathy, they can just drop their email in this the chat box. That way you can grab it. You should have all the district test coordinators, but any of those that are not district test coordinators.
Okay, yeah, put it in there, and that'll work too. Okay,
I have
Stacy,
one more
did you?
question. I got one
Oh,
more.
okay.
We go. Sorry, Stacy. So for the EL students, or let's just say new students coming in that aren't going to be marked. I know Monday, and I'm not the test coordinator, but Monday is when the DRC portal opens where they're going to be checking accommodations. Does that sync nightly from PowerSchool to DRC? So as new students come in, if they get marked, will they automatically dump to DRC, or is there a manual entry?
It's not manual, but it's not real time. So it will take maybe 24 to 48 hours for them to show up in the test session in DRC Insight.
Hey, and Kathy, I just threw something in chat. If y'all will take that formula that I just put in chat and copy it and paste it into the search bar in PowerSchool, that will give you your list of everybody who is currently marked for an alternate assessment in SPED. I'm gonna find y'all the quick and easy ways of all these. So you might want to copy and paste that and save it somewhere so that you can call it back anytime that you need to see your list of who have been marked for the alternate achievement assessment.
Yep, I like that. Maggie, I introduced you at the very beginning, and I'm not sure if you were on yet. Did you want to say anything?
Not really. I was just I want to thank y'all for doing this, and also especially Stacy for taking time out to help with this, and just to let them know that if they have any questions, just send them our way. And if we don't know the answers, if anything PowerSchool we don't know, we'll sure track Stacy down to get those answers for you.
Thank you. Yeah, and thanks, Stacy, from me as well. I hope this was helpful and useful, and I will get the PowerPoint out and the recording as soon as possible. And I have one question. Can you send the links from Stacy to us in the email? Yes. What links are you talking about exactly?
Kathy, I think she's talking about that formula that Stacy put in there.
Oh, okay. Yes, I can do that. Where do we paste the coding that you posted, Stacy? Where do they paste that? Do you want to show them again that page where you can find that? Stacy, was that where you meant for this alternate equals yes code?
I'm sorry, I was muted the whole time I did that.
Yeah,
Let's try
I was
that.
wondering. And
Sorry
and
about
this,
that, y'all.
so this
Yes,
is where
right here.
you can get the list, right?
Yeah, so all of these fields in PowerSchool, one of the great things about PowerSchool is that this is a mega search bar. It can search for more than just names of kids. And so that formula, if you post it in there and then hit search, it will give you, so I've got 18 students who are all marked for the alternate achievement. So remember a while ago, I marked it on Mickey Mouse. So if you click on these kids and go to this screen, you'll see that it says, yes, that is an alternate assessment student. So if y'all didn't know that PowerSchool had that capability to search all kinds of fields that way to give you a list of kids, very quickly, that's one of the things I actually love about PowerSchool. It is a very souped up query.
Right. Wonderful.
Stacy, you said that code shows the ones that receive the alternate assessment, correct?
It's the ones that have been marked in special programs in the IEP, because that flag is reading from in the special ed profile of the student. This right here is a yes. So it's reading that checkbox over here in the SIS to return you that list of students.
Well, I think this has been great. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this, Stacy, and I think we've all learned some things and been very helpful. So we're going to have a peaceful, easy testing season, and just call me or text or email me if you have any problems, and I will send out this recording. Thanks, y'all. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you all. Thank you, Stacy.
Bye.